This is the Wing Woman Show. Are you ready?
You're listening to The Wing Woman Show, and this is your host, Morgan Bars. Today's guest is Whitney Holtzman. She is the owner of Social Victories, where she manages leading athletes from the MLB, NFL, and leading sports teams. She has an incredible background and career history in the sports industry, ranging from local teams to ESPNW. I loved this conversation, mostly because she does something that is so aligned with Wing Woman, but in the professional sports realm, where we focus on women-led personal brands. So we just hit it off right from the very beginning. This is actually our very first conversation that we've ever connected through. I came across her book originally when it was on the shelf of one of our local bookstores here in Tampa, Oxford Exchange, in the local author section. So of course I had to look her up, and I saw that she owns Social Victories. So without further ado, let's tune in to today's episode.
Kind of, to start from the beginning, when I started out when I started Social Victories, I thought that I was just going to be doing social media for them and endorsements.
Right.
Because that's what I had done in the past. Well, I quickly came to realize, wait a second, I care about these guys so deeply. They're like family to me. And all these people are helping them get to the NFL and to the pros, but no one is helping them maximize their time in the spotlight and figure out life after sports. And I became incredibly alarmed because these people that I care so deeply about, all of a sudden were getting cut out of nowhere and their careers were ending, and you're 30 something and not everyone has a support system to go back to. So they're waking up and all of a sudden everything they've known their whole life has gone away. So I start by saying to them, instead of looking at football or pro sports as your purpose, look at it as your platform to your purpose. How can we take this time where you have every opportunity and anyone will meet with you, even if you're the fourth string punter, you're a celebrity, and how can we figure out who you are as a person and what you're meant to do in life? So I think I helped them build that foundation in their identity, which no one had helped them figure out before because they've always been defined as an athlete or a football player. So that's the first step. And I think that's what most agents or representatives miss out on, is they do a shoe deal, a t-shirt deal, and that's all great. But what happens when there's no sports and, COVID hits and, there's no on the field action, or when their playing career ends? People aren't going to want a jersey from most of the league forever. It's just how they're playing. And so I help them figure out, okay, what is it that you could do for the rest of your life when this ends? And so 100% of my NFL clients have second jobs off the field.
Wow.
So, yeah, and it really shows that no matter who you are, you can have to because if they are pro athletes and some of the busiest people on the planet and have very little free time and they're still finding second jobs, then the rest of us have no excuse. So for instance, my Patriots client was my first client, is a guy named Brandon Copeland. And
yeah, I saw him on your website. I think I looked all over it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So Brandon, when I met him, and he would tell you this too, he said, I'm a nobody. Are you sure you want to take me on? But I knew from our first conversation, like, this guy's really special. You can just tell when someone's going to be a big deal. And Brandon had all the tools and was such a fine human being. And I was just grateful he was willing to take a chance with me.
Right.
So, when we started working together, he mentioned that he only lived on 15% of his salary. And I was like, whoa, this is really unheard of for an NFL player. Usually you hear the stories about people blowing their money. So as he was telling me this, I'm like, okay, we need to get the word out. Like, this is really amazing. So he trusted me. I introduced him to a few contacts I knew in the industry, and we did a couple pieces. The first one was with the Players Tribune, totally for free. And now he's upwards of, gets $50,000, $100,000 for an endorsement deal. So knowing a year and a half ago we started for free is amazing. And long story short, he became the financial literacy guru in the NFL. So not only does he do partnerships and endorsement deals, but he does a lot of speaking opportunities at all types of companies because he can help anyone manage their money. And during the pandemic, he's been on CNBC a lot, giving tips. And he's also a financial literacy professor at Penn in the off season. So he's the first active player I know that plays football in the fall, and then right when the season's over, still training every day, but Monday nights he teaches this class at Penn. So he does both in the same year, which is really incredible. And that's sort of more reflective of the guys I work with, where they have these whole other careers so that we're making the most of their lives and setting them up for the future.
Oh my gosh, that is so special too, because sometimes it might be difficult when, I mean, like even for me, like it's difficult to organize all your passions in a way that you can fulfill all of these like life purposes. So for them to have someone like you in their corner to help them figure out all the logistical elements of that while still making money and setting themselves up, that is incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I only work with people that I really love and connect with and admire. And for them to want to work with me, they have to get it also and be willing to put in the extra effort to use their spare
Right.
time wisely. But my Bucks player, Cameron Lynch, for example, always calls me corporate mom. And I think that's the perfect example
Oh,
of sort of what I do for them. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, for so long, everyone has called them an athlete, and that's all they know themselves by. So I just care about them as human beings and want to help their lives. So I think I'm able to look at them in a different way instead of just saying you're an athlete and people stop there. I'm like, wait, you're a human being. These are the things that are amazing about you and your strengths that we need to focus on. And so because I'm not blinded by the athlete part of things, I think we're able to build in a different direction because I just care about them as people.
gosh, and why, like, where do you think you got this from? Like, your ability to kind of help them build out all of their passions?
It's super interesting. I think there are a few sort of pivotal moments. When I was very little, growing up, my mom used to have board meetings on Monday nights, and she'd tell my dad, okay, you have one night a week where you're in charge of putting the kids to bed. And she'd come home and he'd have my brother under one arm and me under the other arm, and we would all be watching Monday Night Football, which my dad refers to as quality parenting. He thought,
Right.
he's raising his children correctly. So that was great. And, because that's probably, it's because of him that I fell in love with sports, and we would go to the Bucks games growing up. And I just going through school, I didn't think I was good at anything. I didn't think I had any strengths. I didn't really like anything in school. I worked hard, but there was nothing that resonated except I wanted to come home and watch sports. So I said to my parents, I want to be the sideline reporter on Monday Night Football. It combines sports and talking to people.
Wow.
And they're like, do you think you could pick a job with more than one opening? So I said, well, I'll also do Sunday Night Football, which just doubled my options.
Yeah.
So they're like, probably like, great, we're going to have to support her forever.
I know, right?
And then, down the line, after internships and jobs in sports, I went to work for a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, GaryVee. A lot of people.
Oh my gosh. No
Yes.
way.
Yeah. So long story short, I talk about this in my book, but I was sitting at LaGuardia eating a pizza at the gate and was reading the iPads they have while I was eating my entire pizza. And VaynerMedia was the first story. And I was looking for a good culture at the time. And I just instantly knew it was where I belonged. And I'd never heard of Vayner or Gary Vaynerchuk. So I, Googled his email address, reached out, sent him an email, told him, my experience and that I was meant to come work for him. And luckily he passed my resume along, and I was one of his pretty early employees. So he was my direct boss. And I say he validated my whole life. He was the one that taught me all about EQ and emotional intelligence. So I think a lot of those skills that you're referring to were sort of my natural abilities, but I just never focused on them because no one had ever talked about them as being skills or strengths. I just thought all people thought this way and that everyone could read people the way I did and understand them. And then I think it was my time working at VaynerMedia where I really started to hone in on branding and social media. And once I got into that world, it became very easy for me to work with someone and to say, okay, this is, it's kind of my natural strengths plus my branding time with Gary. And I could say, all right, this is very clearly what stands out about you and what we should be focusing on.
So what year around was that when you worked with Gary?
So that was early 2014 to the fall of 2000.
Such a great year to learn about social media.
Yeah. So when I worked previously, before VaynerMedia, I worked at Major League Baseball, and I was running the social media accounts for all the teams all at once. And at that time, MLB was really one of the first companies that used social media as a marketing tool. So at the time, like people were like, you work in social media for a company? It was like
Right.
almost unheard of, but there was only content that existed. So all you could do was tweet. I mean, Instagram was created while I was working at MLB. That was like a new part of our job. So, and there were no stories or Instagram TV. It was just like, all right, capture content and figure out how to get people's attention and post it. And then when I went to VaynerMedia, so we're still very early on in the process, I was there when like the second or third person was hired in the paid media department. That was like the new sexy thing at the time.
Yeah.
And hadn't existed before. So, I mean, it was really when I was at Vayner, when social media began to explode, and also when Gary began to explode. So I got the best of all worlds, that he was, growing really quickly and exposed us to a lot of opportunities. But at the same time, it was still small enough when I first arrived where he was my direct boss day to day. He actually created a position for me at the company.
Wow, that is a great fun fact that you can like say now at events. But let's rewind back to when you were in college, because just from reading your bio, you have lined yourself up for so many unique experiences, professionally, personally, like to build social victories. So in college, were you heavily involved in like the sports side of things?
Yeah, so I think what was most valuable for me in college was the internships I had during the summers, because I joked I could have majored in zoology, but when it came to apply for jobs, people looked at my experience. So I had internships with the Tampa Bay Rays, Turner Sports, and ESPN. And I also feel like you end up having to have some luck in life and people who open doors, and there's a little bit of fate involved in how things go. Like the fact that I was at the airport eating pizza the day VaynerMedia was in the newspaper. I mean, that was such a pivotal moment in my life. But when I was at Florida, I was in Tim Tebow's class. And so
my gosh.
Yeah, Florida was really on the map, because between the time I was accepted and graduated, the Gators won 2 basketball championships and 2 football championships. So a lot of people are like, oh, you were there at the perfect time. And I'm like, well, I got there and they got good. And then I graduated, it all went downhill. So I'm pretty sure it all had to do with me.
Yeah.
But, so there was the on the field stuff. At the same time, Florida was producing some of the top female sideline reporters. So a woman named Jen Bates, who worked for ESPN, played softball there. Erin Andrews, who people know, she came in my class because she was still kind of, on the up and up at the time. And then Laura Rutledge, who's now on ESPN. So I had the benefit of not only the success with the teams, but it was really a formative time for female sports journalists coming up the ladder and going, right to the biggest entity from school. And so ESPN came to recruit I guess it must have been my sophomore year. And of course, tons of people went to the recruiting session. And I just thought, well, I know there are going to be a million people there and my resume is going to get lost in the crowd. So I took the recruiter's name off the flyer and I emailed him separately. And that's how I got his attention. It's a longer story, but they had already filled all the spots and he ended up talking to 3 people and got a 51st spot created for me.
Wait, are you serious? Because you emailed him?
Yeah, and we had, after that, he was very kind and he wrote back and we ended up setting up a call, and it was on the call where he just believed in me so greatly, which, again, so I could have put on the best interview and given it my all, but if someone like that wasn't so generous and kind and willing to help me and go to the ends of the earth, I mean, literally fought 3 people at his own company so I could be intern 51 out of 50. That is a guardian angel and the most special kind of person on the planet.
Yeah, I just got like goosebumps from that.
Yeah, I mean, all I can do is try and pay it forward, because I'm so appreciative someone would be so kind and go to the ends of the earth. And for someone he'd never met, do something so selfless that completely changed my life. And then when I got back to school for my senior year, from ESPN, I was the sports reporter on the TV station, UF's TV station, Friday morning. So I was able to do some interviews out in the field and interview Tim Tebow at his pro day, and then I would report on the sports every Friday morning on the news.
Wow. And so then after college, what was your first job right out of college?
That's interesting. So when I was at my ESPN internship in Bristol, that my junior year, I had this idea that they should name the Spanish channel Espanol. I was like, why has no one thought of this? So I emailed the guy who became the president of ESPN eventually. And I was like, hey, you should do this. And he was number 2 at the time. He was like vice president of content. And he was like, no, but you should come meet with me. So I did. And in the meeting.
Wait, just from you like sharing your idea that you had.
Mhm. Yeah, you always got to shoot your shot.
I love this. I love this.
I had nothing to lose. And ESPN was an amazing culture when I was there. They were very supportive of, I mean, obviously they've had their issues. Don't get me wrong. No place is perfect.
Right.
But in terms of, I mean, our first or second day, we had orientation. And then after that, we all had positions that everyone else at the company held. So they empowered us. They trusted us. It was a very mature internship experience. You felt like a real employee. So they said a lot of our best ideas have come from interns. So please feel free. I mean, they made us feel just as important as anyone else. There wasn't a hierarchy. Everyone kind of molded together. So we were encouraged to reach out and share ideas. So being who I am, plus the mix of that encouragement, I decided I'm just going to go for it. What do I have to lose? And in the meeting, he said, well, we're launching this initiative called ESPNW. And I said, well, it's perfect. I, wear my W necklace for Whitney. I've already got your branding. So sign me up.
Oh my gosh.
And what was really, again, the timing factor is I was graduating college. So normally, people said to me, if you want to work at ESPN, you have to go somewhere for, small town and work your way up for 20
right.
years, and then maybe you might have a chance to get to ESPN after
right.
Kansas and Iowa and all these places. And this was the first time where I was like, wait a minute. Just because everyone else did that doesn't mean I can't carve out my own path. And the unique part about ESPNW it's a startup. It was a startup at the time in 2010 with the umbrella of the bigger entity of ESPN. So because it wasn't really me going to work for ESPN, it was going to work for W, which was this small startup trying to get off the ground. They had the recommendation from John Skipper, who was a bigwig at ESPN. And so when I graduated, I started working for ESPNW. But I will say, I know all of this sounds like rainbows and butterflies, but there have been many tough moments. And one of those was I expected to get the job in March. And like any other startup, it took some time to get off the ground. And May of 2010 is when I graduated college, and that's when I thought I was going to get the job because I'd been in talks with them all year about it. And that was the timing I was graduating and when they thought they'd be ready to hire me. So May comes around, I graduate from college. All of my friends are moving to big cities. They're moving to New York, and a lot of them have had jobs lined up since the previous summer. So their whole school year, they knew what they were doing. And, there were people going to law school and med school. It was like everyone seemed to have a seamless transition.
Right.
But for me, this job still hadn't come through yet. And so I moved back to my childhood bedroom. And it was such an amazing opportunity that I didn't want to take something else and not be patient. At the same time, the whole summer, I'm not productive. I've graduated from college. It felt like a huge regression. Ultimately, it was a transition time. And I just had to be a little patient. I mean, in the scheme of things now, those 5 months don't matter. But if you think back, you graduate
5 months, yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. And so I moved back to my childhood bedroom, and the job just kept taking so long to come through. And finally, my parents said in September, you don't have a job by Labor Day. You have to find something else. You can't just keep sitting at home and not doing anything, thinking that at some point this job is going to come to fruition, because you're basically banking on a potential opportunity. You can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Long story short, 2 weeks before Labor Day, they offered me the role and we were able to start. And so it was kind of at the 11th hour in the nick of time. And who knows what would have happened if it didn't come through and I had to find something else. But
so what was your exact role with ESPNW?
It's a good question. So I was employee around number 5-ish. There weren't a ton of people at the time. Yeah. So I was writing, reporting, and editing. So I had 2 major series. This kind of captain's corner where I would find a female athlete who was the captain of her team, and I would have to track her down, interview her, and write the article. And by the way, I had to turn one of those in every day. I don't know how I was able to contact enough people and find them and every day. And then at night, I wrote an article called About Last Night, which summarized all of the major events in the sports world for female sports fans. And then there were times I would edit articles, I would pitch different stories. I guess sort of one of the things I'm most proud of from that time was I pitched and started a series called Power Players, which highlighted women who work on the business side of sports. And that was cool for me because I got to interview the first CEO of an NFL team and, executives at, female athletic directors, executives at the major leagues. And for me, I didn't even really know those roles existed in sports before I started researching these women. So yeah, it was a variety of different things, but I would say it was mostly in the writing, reporting, and editing categories. It was a startup, so you wear many different hats. But I also, the Women's Sports Foundation Awards, I got to be on the red carpet and interview back and Michelle Kwan. So there were a lot of really cool moments too.
Wow. And so how long were you at ESPNW?
So I was there from 2010 to the beginning of 2012.
Okay. I still can't believe that you managed like all 30 Instagram accounts for the MLB. I was just thinking about that.
It's crazy. So it wasn't just me, I'll say that. So I was the third or fourth person in our department. And our department was called Ballpark. And we had a big spreadsheet that had like 646 cells on it. And it was an explanation of what the teams wanted us to post and what they wanted to post. So like at the time, the Yankees didn't have any social media people. But for instance, there were some teams that had 4 or 5, so they wanted us to do less. We had the technology and the video capabilities, so we could get highlights really quickly. And for example, some teams, like our main contact at the Dodgers, like if he had a wedding or had something that day or was sick, I mean, there was no one else, so we would sub in. So it was just, okay, they said, as one person, we can cover X, Y, Z, and we need you to help with the rest. This is what matters to our team. But I mean, if you missed a home run or something, I mean, there was not really time to get up and go to the bathroom.
Right. No, not at all. Did you ever think that you would start your own business?
Never in a million years. And I think that a couple things. One, it's really frustrating that no one teaches you that as an option in school. I mean, I don't know if you ever thought so, but for me, I mean, I didn't know it was something that I could do because no one ever mentioned it. And it's like we spend all this time in school. And I mean, there's a lot of things that we don't learn that I think you should learn, but how did no one mention that you're capable of starting your own business? And the other thing is that I think a lot of people talk about starting your own business is I woke up one day and there were unicorns and angels and the universe spoke to me and I just skipped to the computer, and that was not the case for me. I mean, I really was, I'm conservative when it comes to money, and I've, always, come from a hardworking family, and, in adulthood, you have to kind of figure it out and make your own way. And so I wasn't going to just quit a job and then start a business and hope for the best. So I built my social channels and had the first few clients while I had another full-time job, and did those on the weekends so that I had a little bit of a foundation and could easily transition. The other thing is, I had previously worked prior to starting my own company, with different companies and organizations. And you and I spoke a little bit about this offline.
Yeah.
But I had really not great bosses. They were micromanagers and, made my life pretty miserable. And I was having success and really loving what I was doing and loving my coworkers. But I'm more of a creative thinker and outside the box, and they would feel like I would outshine them. And there were all these situations where there just kept being toxic politics of people who wanted to hold me back or crush my soul. It was almost like bullying in the workplace, and I give 100%. I always want to do my best job, so it was crushing for me. I don't just leave my work at work. I'm passionate about what I do.
Right.
Care about doing a good job. So for people to be cruel in return and not really know how to be a good manager really did a lot of damage to my soul. And I think one day I was just like, okay, I've had this consistent pattern, over and over again. And my mom, who's a superstar lawyer, has had similar issues in her career. She's, always had a ton of success. And then there's people above her that don't like it. And so I went to her experiences and I was like, I wonder what would happen if I executed these ideas and I was able to trust my gut and be able to work on my own terms without having people steer my every move. What would happen? Would I be able to have success? And my first client was Phil Mickelson. I did a project via his agency. And I remember it was 18 pages and it took me 30 hours. And they came back and they loved it. They didn't have one change. They were so
really
were blown away. And it's almost like from those different work experiences. And the boss is like, it's like what happens in emotional abuse, you lose who you are and
Mm-hmm.
lose what you feel like you're capable of. And so to have someone build me back up and reassure me that actually my gut was on track was a good sign for me that like maybe this would work out after all.
Wow. So how did you come in contact with him? Because you said he was your first client.
So this is actually a pretty funny story. I was living in New York at the time, and I was friends with a girl who said, "Hey, I think it was her boyfriend at the time, and they're married now and they have kids. He works at an agency, and they really need some help with social media. Will you come in and talk to them about social media?" And I remember at the time they were like, okay, so what's the difference between like a website and social media? It was like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it was way back in the day. So I'm like, all right, I'm here to tell you, don't worry. So I sat down and told them all, gave them all the tips. I put together a whole presentation, and they said, well, based on this, do you think you could put a plan together, using Phil as an example and what he could possibly do? So I talked all about paid media and strategy and best practices. And in the meeting, I thought, yeah, of course I can help you. I think I said, yeah, I can go, I go home and send you the contract and all those things. And then I quickly went home and started a business so that I could do this project. So
Wow.
I got my first project before the business was officially started, started Googling, okay, well, how is social media contracts, and just kind of, you fake it till you make it.
Yeah. So how long from that moment to the point where you were kind of growing the company more into like a full-time kind of role? How long did that take you?
Yeah, so that was probably August of 2000, let's say 16. And I had other full-time jobs in that time. And then a few months after that Phil Mickelson project is when I started working with my first athlete. And that opportunity came from Gary Vaynerchuk. So I remember at the time, Gary called and said, hey, this particular athlete is looking for marketing help. And I said, well, why would I leave? I was at a company called Rise, which I loved. We used the power of sports to unite neighborhoods and eradicate racism. It was very powerful. I loved my team. Yeah, you felt like you were making an impact on the world, and I learned a lot myself. So I was loving that. But we had the commissioner of every sports league on our board. So I said, Gary, why would I go from working with every athlete in every sport to working with one athlete in one sport? And Gary said to me, because the work you do for Rise, the organization and the founder is always going to get the credit, but if you go represent this athlete, you're going to start building your own brand, and you're going to get the credit finally for the work that you do. And I was like, okay, that makes total sense, and was a good explanation. So I became the chief marketing officer for this one NFL player, and I worked for him to help him build his brand, his businesses. He had fitness centers, and then his mental health nonprofit. So that was kind of my transition. And then in January of 2018, so he got hurt that season I was working for him, and I think he played 4 games maybe, and then didn't play the rest of the season. He's older now, so he never really came back. So my first athlete full-time in my own business. So when I was doing that, I was working for him and his companies. So the first athlete in my own company was Brandon Copeland, who I told you about, and he actually trains in the off season for the NFL at the first athlete's gym. And so he saw the work I was doing for the first athlete and DM'd me or followed me on Instagram. And then he DM'd me and he was like, hey, I've seen the work you've been doing, do you think we could set up a call? So I signed him in the beginning of 2018, and that's when I transitioned.
Wow.
And I've been ever since working under my, as a CEO, my own company. I call the shots, no more bosses, and I'm able to build my own client base.
I love your story because I feel like you built such a strong foundation from the very beginning of your career, like even in college, that kind of slowly led you into owning your own business. So I love that you've kind of connected all the dots and it's come full circle to your own company. But I'm sure it's not as glamorous as people probably think it is. So what does a day-to-day look like for you?
Well, I was going to say, a couple things to that point is people would always say to me, where do you see yourself in 5 years, or and they still ask me that.
Right.
And I would say that pretty much every job I've had, I didn't know could exist. I mean, it wasn't until I was in college that, and graduating college, that social media really even became a thing. And it wasn't until after I I graduated that companies were using. So I could never have dreamed in college that I could possibly, have a job in that field. So I always tell kids, if you don't know what you want to do, it's okay, because your job might not exist yet. And I think also, I say to people, a job is kind of like a spouse. It's hard to predict it. You just have to know yourself well enough to know it's right when you see it. So that's kind of how I felt. It was like, oh, I didn't know you could be a chief marketing officer for an athlete, but that's perfect for me. But I could have never thought of it. So I think it's important to have a North Star and to go after it with your full being, but also be open to other opportunities that come your way. So for example, I always had that dream of being the sideline reporter on Monday Night Football. And then as I chased after that dream, when opportunities open up, I'm like, wow, that's even better than I could have imagined. So that's kind of how the story, I would say, overall unfolded. Day to day, I think what I love is that you have to figure out what you need for your soul. And I love that for the most part, I can make my own schedule. Every day is different. Sometimes I have athlete appearances. Those used to be in person. Sometimes they're virtual. I do a lot of outreach. I have one client who has a podcast, and I'm working on trying to find sponsors for his podcast. I'm always doing outreach for my clients, in terms of the opportunities they're pursuing, if I can think of potential really good clients. I have other clients I work with. For example, last week I had one particular client, and they're more of a massage wellness studio. And so I met with them, and I helped put together a whole digital media game plan for them. I also launched a book in March. So sometimes on here, getting to talk about it and getting to meet amazing other people like yourself. And I think that's the best part of this business. If you're the fullest expression of yourself, you meet the people who are meant to be in your life and who inspire you as you do and what you're doing with your business. And had I not taken that leap of faith, I would have never met amazing women like you, who I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's like, oh my, this is a work thing. So I think what I love is that I am not okay, every day go sit at your desk from these hours. And that was hard for me in corporate America, because I'm very efficient. I'm very organized, type A, work really quickly. And so I didn't need all those hours at a desk, and I was missing out on things that were good for my well-being. So if I need to go to a doctor's appointment or I want to exercise, I can do that, and no one can tell me no. I don't have to wait until I'm I always say, I can fill my days now with good things and good people. And most importantly, I can prioritize what's most essential to me. People always talk about work-life balance, and I say, work-life balance is really addressing whatever is most pressing at the moment. So sometimes on a Sunday, I'm doing work and capturing my clients on the field at their games or on TV, doing awesome stuff. And then sometimes on a Wednesday at 1:00, I'm going to go on a run, or, I'm traveling for a week, or whatever it might be. So the flexibility is something that I, never really had in corporate America. And we have all different types of personalities in the world. I cannot understand why we have basically one set up for everyone.
I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because for so long, honestly, probably up until like a year ago, I felt like from 9 to 5, I had to be working, doing something work related. And slowly I realized that sometimes the more time I took off for myself, the better I actually performed and the bigger my business actually grew when I took a step back and like actually did things to invest in myself, like going on a run on a Wednesday, or like going to Target for the day, like you need those different things.
Yeah. And I think especially when you're building something on your own, or you're spearheading it, you have to take on a lot more stress. And for me, like currently I live alone, so I also have to deal with everything in my apartment, and something break. And so there's a lot that we have to deal with in life. I'm taking care of my clients, I'm there for my family, I'm there for my friends. And so sometimes to fill up your cup, you need to do things for you. And I kind of have to set those boundaries for myself and for my clients, that I need to take that time. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to be there for them. And you feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, because you're like, well, everyone's working right now. And no matter how much success you have, I don't know if it's that we're women or, being an entrepreneur, but you really have to kind of trust your gut and realize it's all about working smarter. No one ever at the end of the day tracks how many hours you've worked.
That is so true. That is so true. And so let's dive in a little into your book too, because not only are you running a company, you're running like your entire household and your entire apartment by yourself. And you also are an author. So what inspired you originally to write the book?
So first of all, let me say that I did not think or know that I was anyone who would be writing a book, or even that anyone would want a book from. So I had no idea until I started writing it that I was someone who would be writing a book. So let me just say that. And hopefully that makes anyone going about their lives who has a great story to tell feel like they are someone who has
Mm-hmm.
wisdom to share, and they are also capable of becoming an author, because I never imagined it in a million years. I thought that was reserved for celebrities. Uh,
Right.
but the publishing company had been following all that I had been doing on social media and with my company and with my athletes. And when they reached out, I just felt an instant connection with them, similar to how I felt at VaynerMedia. I was just like, these
Mm-hmm.
are my people. They're leaders, but down to earth and kind. And they said, have you ever thought about writing a book? We're looking for more books by female entrepreneurs, which I admired them for seeking that out, because it
Right.
showed their character and the type of people they were and who they wanted to support. And they said, have you ever thought of, I'm like, what? No, like, why would I think I was someone who could write a book? So
Yeah.
I had like probably an hour intro call with the person who reached out, and she was like, this is an amazing story. I'm like, it is, to me, it was just, okay.
You're like,
So then I had another interview with the CEO, same thing, told him my story. And he said, all right, the next step is for you to put an outline together of what the book would look like. So I remember it was in May of 2019. 2019, I went with my mom to Argentina, and I'm like, okay, I have to put together
oh,
1-page outline. And I stayed up one night in the hotel room, and it turned out to be 12 pages. And the CEO was like, well, the good news is half the book's written. And then I remember he said, all right, well, the final step is this proposal and this outline goes in front of the partners at our company, and we'll take a vote and let you know what we decide. Like, all right, great. My fate is in, this one
mm-hmm. Right.
meeting, no pressure or anything. And I knew they were going in at like 6:30 on a Thursday. So I thought, okay, I should hear by 7:30, maybe an hour later. Well, 10 o'clock rolls around and I hear nothing. So I'm like, this is crazy. Like, of course I wasn't someone who was supposed to write a book. Like, I don't know why I thought that in the first place, but like, I'm glad I followed the process. And he called at like 10:30 and he was like, sorry, our meeting ran late. I was like, you think? And he said that the vote was unanimous to bring you on as an author. And then I was like, oh, now I have to write a book.
Wow. Yeah. So that's funny how that happened. I was not expecting it to happen like that.
By the way, me either. So
Yeah. But I feel like that's my favorite part about you, like just so far from this conversation, is that you're so heart-centered, and you truly are like the epitome of someone who's just open to opportunities. And you're like, oh, well, you want me to maybe do this? Like, let me submit something to see if maybe the universe is saying that this is a possibility. And
yeah.
it just happens.
Well, I feel like you have to have a belief in yourself, and you have to trust your gut. And when you say heart-centered, that's a really kind way to phrase it. I think for me, I don't know how to be anyone other than myself. Like in
Mm-hmm.
school, I didn't know how to play games and be like the mean girls, which is a good thing, of course, but like,
Right.
I mean, I can only be around people who accept me for me and other straight shooters, because that's the only form of living and communicating I understand. So when I do something, it's because it just feels right for me, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to be anyone else. One of my favorite quotes is by Oscar Wilde, and he said, oh gosh, I have to look it up, but it's something like, the quote is, just be yourself, everyone else is already taken.
And it's just like you have such a sense of alignment. Are there different things that you do to check in with yourself to become so aligned? Or do you kind of think it was back when you worked with Gary, like developing that emotional intelligence?
I think I probably always had it, but when no one ever talks about it, it gets buried and deep seated, because you don't think it's anything that's prioritized or important, or that's even called anything. I didn't know the
Mm-hmm.
term emotional intelligence. I just thought I love people. And I thought, okay, that's an
Right.
interest of mine. But it wasn't until I got to VaynerMedia that Gary was like, by the way, there's a bunch of other people in the world like this, and I want to hire all of them. And I also prioritize this skill set because I think these type of people succeed in business.
Mm-hmm.
So he helped me understand myself and validate it and have that belief, but I think it was always kind of inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there are things that help and hurt. Being around other healthy people is incredibly validating. Being around other leaders, especially women, just like can totally turn your week around. Being around unhealthy people, I put this in my book and I tell my clients, 0% toxicity. You can, addition by subtraction, get rid of anything that brings you down, but that doesn't add to your emotional bank account.
Emotional bank account. I love that.
Yeah. So I think that I do my best to sort of be my own bouncer and create those boundaries to make sure I have healthy people in my life. And then I do my best, to exercise and to do things that make me happy and to just like really trust my gut at all moments.
Right.
So I think it's a combination. It's always something you have to work on.
Right. So what would you say has been the highest point of your career and then the lowest point?
Wow. So, gosh, there's been so many of each. Okay, so the one of the highest points, just because it was unique. I mean, obviously, when my clients have wins, that's so exciting because I feel like I really helped them get
Mm-hmm.
there. And I mean, there's been times when I was at Rise where I came up with this sideline racism campaign. Okay, I'm gonna talk about two highs. And
Yeah.
okay, one, when I was at Rise, there was a middle school football team in Beaumont, Texas that saw Colin Kaepernick kneel, and they were in middle school and he was their hero. So they kneeled at one of their football games during the national anthem, and they were in Texas. So the kids started getting death threats and their entire season was canceled. And they didn't understand because they were taught and understood that they were kneeling because they were standing up for their history, their background, their people, their skin color. Why are we getting punished for doing the right thing? It goes against everything we've been told. So I tracked down their coach, and when I was at Rise, we had a Super Bowl tailgate, Super Bowl town hall, every year. And at the town hall, the Super Bowl was in Houston that year, so Beaumont, Texas wasn't too far. We invited the whole football team, and then we had a panel of the NFL players that had kneeled that first season. So all of a sudden, these kids got to come in, and they have their heroes there in real life rewarding them, saying, great job, amazing. And it totally revitalized their spirits and validated everything they'd done. And those players ultimately funded a whole new league for these kids with like the top equipment. So they ended up winning in the end, but I was able to bring them together and to create, be able to create that new league. And just seeing that moment of those kids,
Right.
people who supported them, who they looked up to so much, like you couldn't help but cry. So that was one. The other was I was visiting my brother in Miami, and this was, I guess, last year, and I was walking into the stadium and the Dolphins were playing the Jets, and I had two clients on the Jets. And I remember like bursting into tears before I walked in because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to go see two athletes at the highest level that are just my clients. This didn't happen because I worked for an organization or because, I was tied to someone else. Like I made this happen on my own. And that was an unreal sense of accomplishment for me. It was like, I made it.
Right.
Low moments, I've had so many, and they pretty much all involve bad bosses. One particular job, I spoke up about. The long story short, the job tried to convert me from my current religion to the religion most people in the company were. And again, it was kind of sports. They didn't really understand. They hadn't worked in the business world long. And then they started bullying me for not wanting to convert. And ultimately they fired me. And I was loving what I was doing at the time and having a lot of success. So to go through being the only one bullied out of an entire organization just because of who you are, and then obviously getting fired, I mean, that was rock bottom moment. And it was, I like didn't really have any money saved. I was like, what am I going to do? So it was then that I decided to start my own business. And I just remember that period thinking like, I'm about to like make this company up essentially, and I don't know if it's going to work, and I have no money, and I just lost my job. Like pretty much doesn't get worse than this.
Wow. So that was like such a deep like transition phase for you.
Oh, without a doubt. And there's been many of those, many days. I mean, when I was at Major League Baseball, this was another low, which I could write a whole book about those. I was tweeting about one particular baseball team, and I thought the game was over, but it was actually the middle of the ninth, not the end of the ninth. So I tweeted that the team either won or lost, whatever it was, but it was wrong. The game wasn't over. And then the bottom of the ninth happened, and it turned out to be the opposite result. And that it was so hard. There were only a few of us. You were
right.
but you couldn't make a mistake. It was as if the team was tweeting. So what do you mean you tweeted the wrong score? It was like life or death, and not the best culture at the time. Bosses who kind of only came down on you when you did something wrong. And so we had kind of a fact checker, and they called him, and he lost his job that day. And I thought I was going to lose my job.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I cried for like 3 days because, like, again, I'm in New York. This is my dream. If you lose it, like, then you've been fired, and what do you do? I'll say one other anecdote, and stop me if I'm telling you too much.
No.
But when I was at MLB, on the day of the Super Bowl, we always say baseball is not going to win the day. No one's talking about baseball the day of the Super Bowl. So we were short-staffed. Like, I was the only one working some of the team accounts, and then also the MLB account at the time. And I remember it was the year the Super Bowl was in New Orleans, and the lights went out. I don't know if you remember that year, but anyway, it was, and because social media was so new, brands like didn't jump into world events at the time. So I'm like, it would be really funny if like MLB like poked their head into the Super Bowl from the official account, because that was like unheard of. So I remember like people, the lights go out, people don't know what to do. Everyone's okay, but everyone's staring at their phones looking for information. So I'm like, we're going to take advantage. So I posted this tweet that was like, hey, football, like just a quick reminder, pitchers and catchers report in 8 days. And the tweet went viral because all of a sudden baseball's like, football. And again, no corporate account at the time like jumped into world events that way. So the tweet went viral. It, got a zillion retweets. And there was a particular guy at the company who was higher level than I was. And they had sent him to New Orleans for the week because they said, well, if there's football fans there's probably baseball fans. Maybe you can get some stories for our pages. And I remember he kind of like ate and drank the whole week, didn't really do much work. And then when I put out the tweet, he screenshotted it and sent it to the CEO and said, did you see what I did? So all of a sudden, I'm part-time trying to earn full-time. This guy's already beloved. He's basically one of my supervisors, and he's stealing my thunder and my accomplishment is his own. And because I'm working at nights and on the weekend, I don't really have any interaction. The top brass don't know who I am, but they know him. So how was I ever going to be able to validate? And I felt stuck in a horror movie. I mean, it was like, a kind of, a form of like feeling trapped. I know this was mine, and this is the biggest thing I've done so far in my career. I need it, and he's taking credit. So luckily 3 days later, someone who knew me but was also really high up on his own and went into the CEO.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, he was someone who, an executive, but he happened to know who I was. And so he went into the CEO's office and he said, actually, did you know this wasn't so-and-so, it was Whitney? And the CEO called me in and said, did so-and-so send you thanks or anything, like pass along? I'm like, no, but that's okay. Like, he was like, we love this tweet. I'm so glad we know it's you now. We're so appreciative, and kind of gave me the accolades for the success. And then he went into a pretty large meeting and he said, called out the person to the guy and said, hey, so I hear I've been giving you credit for something you had absolutely nothing to do with. So it all ended up getting worked out.
Wow.
And I earned full time shortly after that. But I almost thought I was going to have to quit because I didn't want to live in that kind of lie and be at a place where that was the culture where I was going to have ideas and not be able to benefit from them.
Right. Gosh, well, all the ups and downs, and they've all led you to, honestly, you could probably write a second book at this point with all of those like stories and lessons in it. I will make sure to link your book down below as well. So for the guests listening, perfect Christmas present for all of those readers on the list and all the up and coming college graduates that have high aspirations this Christmas season. Whitney, I am so thankful that we finally made the time to hop on a Zoom call. It is so nice to meet someone who does something so similar.
I agree. And thank you for being an inspiration to me as well. And I'm so proud of you, and what you're accomplishing is so groundbreaking. And, having other people, who do what we do, and just one person like you are my oxygen who helps, reassure me. And, you need other people there to help you feel like you're on the right track. And meeting you in this conversation has been so revitalizing, absolutely the highlight of my week. And
Oh my
you for
gosh.
mentioning the book as well for anyone looking. I
Of
don't think
course.
it's the title, but it's called You Are the First You. And it's basically the story of my career and the lessons that I think you need to know in life and in business, but that no one taught me in school.
That's great.
And it's on Amazon. There's ebook and audiobook if you like to listen in different forms. So that's the best place to grab it.
Yeah, I mean, the title itself you could just buy that title and you would learn enough from it. So I already know that it's going to be great. I have mine coming in the mail soon. It should be coming in it's supposed to come today, actually. So
will you let me know what you think of it?
Yes, I want you to sign it, actually.
Without a doubt, not a problem. As soon as we can all see each other in person,
yes,
whatever I can do, I would be more than happy to do it.
Yes. Okay.
It means the world. Final thought. I would probably write a second book about launching the first one during a pandemic. I joked that all my friends were having babies and I was having a book because it took like a year from start to finish, and it was coming out March 31st. And I had all these exciting book signings planned and in-person things. And then, as you know, COVID hit and all that got canceled. So I worked hard on this book, and then all of the payoff kind of disappeared of being able to talk about the book and celebrate.
Yes.
So this conversation means so much. And even you buying like one purchase means the world. It makes me so happy and kind of helps build me back up from the disappointment I experienced. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you're welcome. I can definitely relate to the launching a book in the middle of the coronavirus. We had a client who had a book launch in March, and we sent out masks and like hand sanitizer with the books on them, because it's like there's nothing else you could have done in the middle of March.
Exactly. I love that. The first month the book came out, and I've lived in New York for 6 years, but I love Tampa, and I'm so glad we're in the same area. That's the other thing too, people in your area doing the same thing. You're like, oh, I have this like sisterhood here.
Yeah.
I was very appreciative and grateful that I was in Tampa when COVID hit, not only for the obvious reasons of we have scenery and it's easier to social distance compared to New York, but this community is like a big family, and all of my responsibilities or endorsement, whatever you want to call it, everything I had scheduled for March work-wise, it was supposed to be my biggest month, and it all got canceled. So I was, so excited, and I had these amazing contracts signed and opportunities, and then it all gets wiped away. So on top of that, the book comes out, and this community stepped up in such a breathtaking way, and people were just Venmoing me, and I mail them the books. I drop it off, and leave it at their front door. I became a delivery service, and because of that, I was able to pay my bills for April. So this community is such a lifesaver, and I'm so grateful, of all the wonderful people in the Tampa Bay area.
That's great. That's so great. So thank you so much for everything. And again, I linked it all down below so they can click directly to it.
You are a rock star. Thank you for being such a champion and amazing person. This conversation was amazing, and I can't wait for many more.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait too.
All right, thanks, Morgan.